Ethan had always loved the stillness of the hotel pool after hours. The rest of the building would be quiet. Hallway lights dimmed, doors locked, the faint hum of vending machines somewhere down the corridor. He liked the calm. It gave him a space to breathe, to feel something unspoken in the silence. Lately, though, that silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. He moved through the water slowly, the faint splash echoing against tiled walls. The clock on the wall read a little after 10. Most nights he stayed until closing. It wasn't about the workout anymore. It was about the quiet. His husband, Michael, was away again. Another trip for work. Another series of brief text messages and missed calls. They had been married for 4 years, but it felt like they'd spent half that time in different cities, and the rest in different worlds. Ethan tilted his head back, floating, letting the ceiling lights blur into silver halos. He remembered when those lights used to remind him of the stars over their first apartment, the nights they'd fall asleep mid-conversation. Now the idea of reaching for his phone just felt exhausting. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, trying to lose himself in the sound of the water. That's when he heard it, a soft creak, a door opening at the far end of the pool. He thought for a moment it was one of the staff, maybe someone coming to lock up early. But the steps that followed were slow, unhurried. When Ethan turned, he saw someone he hadn't seen before. A man, probably close to his age, with damp hair and a towel draped casually over his shoulder. He wore a simple black t-shirt and gym shorts, the kind that clung slightly after a workout. There was something easy about the way he walked, like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere. "Didn't think anyone else came down here this late," the man said with a friendly tone. Ethan straightened in the water. "Usually no one does. It's kind of my quiet time." The man smiled and set his towel on one of the chairs. "Hope you don't mind sharing the quiet tonight." Ethan shook his head. "Not at all." The man kicked off his sandals, tested the water with one foot, and nodded in approval. Perfect temperature. He waded in slowly, the ripples spreading toward Ethan. They swam in silence for a while, two strangers moving through water that reflected the pale light above. It wasn't awkward. It felt strangely natural, as if they both understood that words would only disturb the peace. After a few minutes, the man broke the quiet. "I'm Ryan, by the way. Just checked in this morning. I think I saw you in the gym earlier." Ethan paused mid-stroke, smiling faintly. "Yeah, that's me. I work here part-time as a trainer." Ryan nodded. "Makes sense. You've got that focused energy." Ethan laughed softly. That's one way to describe it. They kept talking. Light, easy conversation about travel, how quiet the town was this time of year, how the pool almost felt hidden from the rest of the hotel. Ryan said he was in town for a short-term consulting job, something about architecture. He'd be around for a couple of weeks. Ethan listened more than he spoke, but there was something about Ryan's voice that filled the room, steady, grounded, and curious. The conversation drifted like the ripples in the water, small but meaningful. When Ryan finally swam to the ladder and climbed out, droplets of water trailed down his arms. He grabbed his towel and smiled. "Didn't mean to interrupt your solitude." "You didn't," Ethan said honestly. "It was nice." Ryan gave a small nod. "See you around then." The sound of the door closing echoed across the pool room, and then it was quiet again. Only the low hum of the filter and Ethan's heartbeat filled the air. He stared at the door for a few seconds longer than he meant to, then exhaled, realizing how long it had been since he'd had a conversation that felt genuine. He floated on his back again, eyes tracing the ceiling. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just two people talking. But the ease of it, the comfort, stayed with him longer than expected. When he finally left for the night, the hallways were empty. He glanced at his phone. One unread message from Michael. "Call you tomorrow." "Late meeting." Ethan typed a quick reply. "Okay, hope it goes well," and slipped the phone back into his bag. As he walked past the glass doors leading to the pool, he caught his own reflection in the dark pane. The lights shimmered on the surface behind him, soft and distant. For a brief second, he thought about turning around, going back for another swim. But he didn't. Instead, he whispered to himself, "See you around," echoing Ryan's words, half to the stranger, half to the part of himself that he'd almost forgotten was still there, and with that, Ethan pushed through the door into the cool hallway, the faint sound of water fading behind him, carrying with it a small, unfamiliar feeling that wasn't quite longing, but wasn't peace either. The next few days slipped by quietly, yet Ethan found himself noticing the time more than usual. He'd catch himself glancing toward the glass doors leading to the pool, wondering if Ryan might show up again. It wasn't something he planned, just a quiet curiosity that followed him through his shifts. Their first meeting had felt effortless, almost natural. Still, a part of him tried to rationalize it. He told himself it was just small talk, just a friendly moment in a quiet place. But underneath that explanation, something softer lingered, an awareness that someone had looked at him. Really looked, for the first time in a while. On Thursday evening, Ethan stayed late again, folding towels and closing the storage cabinets. The pool area was empty, the blue lights glowing faintly across the water. He sat on the edge, trailing his hand through the surface, watching ripples fade into stillness. That's when his phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "Can't sleep. You at the pool?" He hesitated for a moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he typed back, "Yeah, just finishing up." A few minutes later, he heard the familiar click of the door. Ryan stepped in, carrying a towel and that same calm smile. "Thought I might find you here," Ryan said. Ethan chuckled lightly. "Guess I'm predictable." "Predictable isn't bad," Ryan said, walking closer. "It means you have a place where you feel at peace." Ethan didn't answer right away. He realized how rare it was for someone to notice things like that. "Yeah, maybe." They both sat near the edge, their reflections stretching across the smooth surface. The conversation started small. Work updates, local restaurants, travel plans, but slowly shifted into something deeper. Ryan mentioned that he traveled a lot for his job, moving from city to city, always in temporary spaces. "It's weird," he said. "You get used to being somewhere new, but you stop feeling like you belong anywhere." Ethan nodded, staring at the water. "I think I get that. You married?" Ryan asked gently, not prying, just curious. Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, Michael. He's a lawyer. He's good, just busy." Ryan nodded slowly, understanding without judgment. "Must be tough, all the distance." Ethan laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "We used to handle it better. Now it feels like we're just passing each other's shadows." For a while, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the lights filled the silence. Then Ryan said quietly, "Sometimes it's not distance that breaks people. It's the silence that fills the space between them." The words struck deeper than Ethan expected. He looked at Ryan and saw something sincere. No agenda, no pretense, just quiet empathy. Ethan looked away first. "You ever feel like you're doing everything right, but it still doesn't feel right anymore?" Ryan nodded. "More times than I'd like to admit." They sat like that for a long time, the water reflecting the dim lights above. Ethan felt strangely calm and nervous at once. He didn't understand why it was so easy to open up to someone he barely knew. Maybe it was because Ryan didn't ask for anything. He just listened. Eventually Ryan stood, stretching slightly. "You should get some rest," he said. "You've probably got an early shift." Ethan looked up, smiling faintly. "Yeah, thanks for the company." Ryan hesitated near the door. "Anytime." When he left, the silence returned, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like a space that had been acknowledged. That night, Ethan walked home under the soft streetlights. His mind drifted between guilt and relief. He hadn't done anything wrong, at least not outwardly, but part of him knew that something inside had shifted. He'd allowed himself to feel again, even if he didn't know what to do with it. When he got home, the apartment was dark. A single message from Michael waited on his phone. "Just got back to the hotel. Another long day. Hope you're okay," Ethan typed back. "I'm fine. Hope you're resting." Then he stared at the screen, the small blinking cursor like a heartbeat, before setting the phone down. He lay awake for a long time, thinking about the sound of Ryan's voice, the way his presence had softened the room. It wasn't romantic, not in the way stories described it. It was something gentler, like being reminded of warmth after a long winter. He turned onto his side, watching the faint light from the window stretch across the floor. His chest ached in a way that wasn't painful, just alive. Ethan wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, he felt like he might actually be ready to face it. The next evening, the pool felt different. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was the way the water reflected the fading daylight through the skylight above. Ethan hadn't planned to come in that night, but something about the stillness of the place kept pulling him back. It had become his place of clarity, somewhere he could just exist, without pretending that everything was fine. He set his gym bag down and walked along the edge of the pool, tracing a line in the condensation on the tiles with his fingertips. For the first time in a while, his thoughts weren't chaotic. They were just honest. He didn't expect Ryan to show up again. He assumed their quiet talks had already said what needed to be said. But as he turned toward the door, he saw it open. And there Ryan was, towel in hand, same faint smile. "Didn't think I'd see you tonight," Ryan said, walking closer. "Guess I couldn't stay away," Ethan replied. Smiling a little, Ryan set his things down beside him. "I was hoping you'd come by. I wanted to say goodbye in person. I'm leaving tomorrow morning." Ethan's heart sank more than he expected. "That soon?" "Yeah," Ryan nodded. "Work's done. Back to the next project, the next city." They both sat by the pool's edge, feet dangling in the water, watching the ripples move gently outward. The silence between them was heavier now, but not uncomfortable. "Just full," Ethan finally asked. "Do you ever get used to saying goodbye?" Ryan thought for a moment. "You don't. You just learn how to carry people with you in small ways. A word, a moment, a feeling you didn't expect." Ethan nodded, staring at the reflection of the ceiling lights. "You know, the first night you walked in, I thought you were just another guest. I didn't realize I'd still be thinking about that conversation days later." Ryan smiled softly. "Sometimes it only takes one unexpected moment to wake something in us." Ethan turned to look at him. "You did that for me. I didn't realize how numb I'd become." Ryan's expression softened. "You were just surviving. That's what people do when love turns quiet." Those words hit deeper than Ethan wanted to admit. He swallowed hard, unsure whether to thank him or to stay silent. "I don't want you to think," Ethan began, then paused. "I mean this, whatever this was, it wasn't about anything physical. It just felt real." Ryan nodded. "I know. Sometimes real doesn't need a name." They sat there quietly again, the faint hum of the water filters filling the room. Ethan realized how rare it was to have a connection without expectation. Ryan hadn't asked for anything. Not attention, not affection, not answers. Just presence. After a while, Ryan stood and walked to his towel. He dried his hands and looked back at Ethan. "Promise me something?" Ethan looked up. "What's that?" "Don't forget to be honest. With yourself, with him, with what you need. It's the only way you'll ever stop feeling lost." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'll try." Ryan smiled faintly. "That's enough." He picked up his bag, slung the towel over his shoulder and said, "Take care." Ethan wanted to say something more, to thank him, to ask him to stay a little longer, but the words wouldn't come. He just nodded. "You too." Ryan turned toward the door, pushed it open, and disappeared down the hallway. The sound of the door closing echoed in the pool room, and then there was only stillness again. Ethan sat where he was, staring at the reflection of the overhead lights breaking softly across the water. For a long time, he didn't move. He just breathed. When he finally stood, he walked to his locker, grabbed his phone, and opened a message to Michael. His thumb hovered over the screen before he typed, "When you get back, we need to talk. Really talk." He didn't know what that conversation would look like or what it would mean for them, but it felt necessary. Not to confess anything wrong, but to finally be honest about how far apart they'd grown, and whether they could find their way back. Later that night, Ethan returned home and sat on the balcony. The city below was quiet, washed in orange light from street lamps. He thought about the way Ryan had listened, really listened, without judgment or distraction. It wasn't love. It wasn't betrayal. It was something else entirely, a reminder that connection doesn't always lead to forever, but sometimes it's enough to wake a heart that's been asleep. He closed his eyes and let the cool night air move across his face. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was waiting for someone else to make him whole. He felt like he could begin again, not by forgetting, but by understanding. When morning came, Ethan walked back into the pool area before his shift started. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the light of the new day. He sat on the edge, letting his feet touch the surface, small ripples forming and fading. He smiled quietly to himself, whispering, "See you around," though he knew Ryan was already gone. But in that stillness, Ethan realized something had changed, not the world around him, but the way he saw himself within it. Sometimes, it only takes one stranger to remind you that you're still capable of feeling something real, and for Ethan, that was enough.